It does sound like it's on. Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out on behalf of Compassion Action Network. I'd like to welcome each of you here today. Compassion Action Network is a collaborative effort of Anoka County Human Services, local faith communities, school districts, and local nonprofits. And we seek to work together to creatively address community needs in Anoka County. With each event that we host, we hope to create a space to have meaningful conversations and give you a chance to interact and hopefully inspire some action. I'm going to briefly introduce our CAN board members. You can just wave your hand when I say your name. We have Kathy Palm from Anoka County Social Services, Sue Vang with Lee Carlson Center, Ellen Raker, who is out at the welcome desk, Mary Jo Loftus, and Don Rutt of Alexandra House. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Before we get started, the restrooms are located across the hallway. If you see the vending machines, you just take a left and the bathrooms are right there. We're not going to take any formal breaks, so feel free to move around as you need to. In order to allow as much time as we can for our presenters, we're going to ask you to hold your questions to the very end when we have a Q&A time. We have evaluation forms and certificates of attendance. You can feel free to take the certificate if you need that. The evaluation forms, we just ask you to fill those out. I think they're like 3 or 4 questions. It's pretty quick. And just leave it at your seat at the end. We are recording this event, and it will be posted on our website through YouTube. So today our topic is violence in our community, a conversation and resources. And I'm going to introduce all the speakers at one time, and then they will just follow each other up. They have about 20 minutes to speak. That way we won't interrupt the flow of their presentations. We're going to hear first from Deputy Ryan George. He's Deputy Director of the Fridley Police Department, and he's going to give us law enforcement's perspective on what's happening in our community. And then we have Amanda Folk, the Community Engagement Coordinator for Alexandra House, and Katie Metcalf, who's the Director of Community-Based Programming for Lee Carlson Center, and they're going to talk about domestic violence and resources that are available in our community to address various aspects of violence. And then Dawn Rutt is going to finish us off, and she is the Elder Abuse Services Coordinator for Alexandra House, and she is going to lead us through a Bystander Empowerment activity. So I will turn it over to Deputy Ryan George.
Good morning. I won't be tied to the podium because I like to walk around. I'll keep it really informal. I know she said to kind of hold questions, but I like things to be a little more interactive. So if you do have a question, please ask, because I know there's always these burning questions that people have. And so I don't want to get too derailed off any topics, but I don't have like a prepared presentation or anything, because I like to just kind of shoot from the hip, not literally, figuratively. So just to give a little background about me, I've been with the Fridley Police Department for 17 years. I grew up in Coon Rapids, actually, and went to UMD for my undergrad, and went to St. Thomas also, and have a few degrees. Not that anyone really worries about that. But throughout my time here at Fridley, I've been a police officer, just a patrol officer, and then I did spend 3 years as a school resource officer at Fridley High School and Fridley Middle School, and from there was a detective, and then went back out to the street as a street supervisor, a sergeant, and then I was the lieutenant who was in charge of our investigations division. So I oversaw our detectives and school resource officers and our drug task force officer. And from there I was promoted to captain, and then in 2018 we changed into public safety, so my captain role turned into deputy director. So my current role as deputy director, I oversee operations of our police department, just day-to-day operations. I handle our budget, our policies, all those things that happen kind of behind the scenes, but I do still wear my uniform. Some people call it a costume, but I like to get out still and be out on the streets as much as I can. But Also, another role that I have is I'm on the board for the Alexandra House, and I have been for a few years. I'm currently the board chair. So I work closely with Dawn and her counterparts, and that's something that I enjoy doing. So just talking about violence in our community, I know people are always wondering about what's going on, especially over the last few years. They hear a lot of things on the news about whether it's carjackings or other robberies, person crimes, property crimes, sexual assaults. I can tell you that we are seeing an increase in our call volume. Our call volume has gone up almost 7% each year since 2020. Even just in Fridley alone, we handled 33,000 calls for service last year. And that's in a city of less than 33,000 people, and that's 46 sworn officers that are handling all 33,000 of those calls. So we're busy. Not all of those calls are, high priority in progress calls, but we're still getting called nonetheless, and we have to respond to those. The bulk of our calls and our arrests actually do come from retail crime. Since in Fridley here we have Walmart, Home Depot, Menards, Target, Cub, a lot of big box retailers. A quarter of all of our arrests last year came from Walmart alone. So you can see how that can kind of be a drain on our resources. We also have Unity Hospital, which is kind of turning towards focusing on mental health and chemical dependency. So we have a lot of calls for service up there, just from people who are seeking services, and then even when they're discharged, they're out in the community. Whether they live here or not, they're still in our community and they're generating calls for service. So our call volume has risen significantly. Luckily, with us here in Anoka County, we don't have some of the problems that Hennepin and Ramsey do, just because I think there's kind of a mindset among some of these criminals, especially violent criminals, that they know if they go to Anoka County, we are fully staffed. Our police department is fully staffed right now. We're not down, 20, 30, 40, 50, hundreds of cops like some other agencies are. So we do have the resources right now to actually go after criminals and hold them accountable. And then when they are booked here, there's a higher likelihood of them actually having some sort of accountability when they get in front of a judge and our county attorney's office too. That's not saying we can't improve a little bit. I'm always looking for some improvement. It seems like the people that we're running into all the time are repeat offenders, and they might have 6 or 7 pending felony cases when we're arresting them for another felony, and we're going to see them again tomorrow, probably committing another felony. So that's, a couple things are leading to that, but I know there's a huge backlog in the court system right now because of COVID. A lot of trials have been put on hold, and a lot of these people we just can't house, so they're back out on the street with a pretty low bail, and we're just going to keep running into them. So we're trying to do our job as police officers, getting after these people who are constantly committing these same crimes over and over and over and over again. And we're just hoping that at some point the court system does catch up and actually hold them accountable. Just for our community and our victims, and whether it's thefts at a retail shopping center, you don't want to pay higher prices because this person every 2 days goes and steals $700 from Target, because we're seeing that every 2 days. So hopefully we can catch up with that and turn a corner. It does seem like people are feeling a little more empowered in the community to maybe take action. I know Dawn will talk about that. I think people are just getting sick of hearing about bad things on the news. They're hearing about violent crime. They're just seeing crime happening all the time. I know during the pandemic, when the roads were pretty wide open, the number of people that we had going 120 miles an hour was just insane. And I was, of course, we were in person the entire time, and I drive a squad car to and from home because I'm on call and need to make it in a quick time, sometimes. And I have a radar in my car, and I'd be on Highway 10, and I'm like, why is this person coming up behind me going 117 miles an hour? And it was almost daily. You know, it was a free-for-all. People think there's no rules, the cops are busy, cops don't want to do traffic stops because of the political climate. So I think people just figured it's a free-for-all. It's just, let's do whatever we want, steal it if no one's looking. So hopefully we're getting away from that trend where there's a little bit more accountability in our society because there's more eyes on things now. There's more people out. People are returning to the workplace. Businesses aren't being left alone for 2 weeks at a time, so someone can come ransack the place, steal catalytic converters off trucks, whatever they're doing. But the pandemic, I think, and then the political climate over the last couple of years has really hurt our society, just because you have cops that don't want to do anything. They don't want to take proactive enforcement, just because of what may happen if they do confront somebody who's committing a crime. And I don't blame them. I don't work the street every day, so it's hard for me to say for my office, you know, hey, get out there, go after these people. But also I want to say, get out there, you know, go after these people. And we do still have cops that love going out and finding drugs and guns and warrants, all those things. Speaking of guns, we do see a ton of them now. We used to recover guns off of people, you know, occasionally, but now it's almost daily. We're responding to shots fired calls all the time, and sometimes it'll be on our border, so people are hearing it in Brooklyn Center, they're hearing it in North Minneapolis, and they'll call and say, I just heard 30 seconds of automatic gunfire. We're seeing a lot more ghost guns, and we're seeing guns with the sear switches, the auto switches, so it'll turn a Glock like this into a fully automatic handgun, and they'll have an extended magazine, sometimes a big drum magazine. We've seen high capacity magazines up to 200 rounds on a gun with a sear switch. And these are people who are shooting indiscriminately. They don't care about what their background is. So if they're trying to hit that one person, they don't care if there's a crowd behind them. So that's why you're seeing some of these shootings, especially on the north side, where 4, 5, 6 people are being hit, just because they don't really care what they're hitting. We have seen some of that spill over into our community, just with some of the complete disregard for other people's safety and a disregard for for the sanctity of life, really. You don't care about who's in that vehicle. You're just gonna shoot at that vehicle just because they cut you off. We have seen that. We had a pretty violent assault the other night, where a guy who lived in the apartment actually heard this lady being assaulted and robbed and went over and tried to intervene, and they shot at him. And luckily they didn't hit him, but the round went into another apartment where a guy lives with his little boy, and luckily they weren't there. But you think of the potential for just really bad things happening in that situation. It's because, you know, you got guys who have guns that shouldn't have guns, that are committing a violent crime. They shoot at someone else who's trying to intervene, and then it goes and affects somebody else too. We've had other apartment buildings shot up just because people are mad at someone in one particular apartment, and then they'll just spray the whole apartment, the whole building. So not to be all gloom and doom, because we do have a lot of good things going on, but you know, this is through our lens. We're seeing it every day with our police reports, and luckily we have the resources to address some of these things in our community, being fully staffed and having an extremely supportive community here in Fridley. Great mayor, great council, great city leadership. So we have been empowered to go out and go after some of these violent criminals. So we have luckily been able to partner with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. We had a person assigned to that throughout the summer, to a violent crime work group. So they would go out all over the metro. So they weren't tied just to Fridley or Anoka County. They'd go to St. Paul, Minneapolis, you know, even southern Minnesota if they had to, and they would hunt down violent fugitives. And usually it was people with guns that shouldn't have guns. They all have been arrested for felon in possession of a firearm 5, 6, 7 times, and they're all just still awaiting trial on all those. So we go find them, and they're in possession of 6 or 7 stolen guns with sear switches. So luckily the ATF stepped in and said, Minnesota's doing nothing about this. You're just letting these people out, so they are now indicting them federally, and they can go to federal prison now, and some of them are getting 25 to 30 years in federal prison because the Fed said enough is enough. We have to do something about this. There's a lot of innocent people being killed. So luckily, the tide is turning with that too. Andrew Luger is back with the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Minnesota, and he has taken a very strong stance on gun crime and the illegal possession of firearms. That seems to be just slipping through the cracks here in Minnesota. So I know it's an election season, so crime is one of those hot button issues right now, and it seems like everyone is, trying to figure out what they can do to make things better. And it's, from our standpoint, it's just, hey, hold the criminals accountable. If they're doing the same thing a dozen times, that person is the problem. And we'd love to see those people be put away at some point. So, yeah. It could be a mix of both. I know some stuff on, especially the north side, but even within Minneapolis, downtown has kind of been taken over too with the highs and the lows, and some of the gangs there. You could have gangs, but just sometimes it's just groups that have a beef with one another, and it could be something as trivial as oh, you weren't supposed to drive down my street, I'm going to shoot at you. So gangs, there is a gang component to it, but it's not always gangs. It's just, I think the problem is what used to happen is if you feel slighted in some way, and it's going to take a lot to get to the point where you're going to go over to that person's house and try to kill them. But now it's just like, oh, that's the first step. They sent a nasty text to me, I'm going to go kill their family. It just seems like that's where we're at in our society. That level of escalation is just so quick. And you hear about it on the news all the time. Someone screws up a McDonald's order and they're going to shoot up the drive-through. I don't know how we got to that point in our society, but hopefully we can turn things around. So, yeah.
Why would you say, you mentioned that the federal government has stepped in and pursuing charges where Minnesota has not been able to. What is the difference why is the federal able to step forward and the state not in terms of the charging?
Yeah, so the state will charge someone with, say you're a prohibited person and you're in possession of a firearm or ammunition. So state statute says that you're supposed to go away for 60 months, mandatory minimum 60 months. So we'll charge under that state statute, but the bail amounts sometimes are really low. People are getting bailed out, and they might have a few of those cases pending. And then when you have that backlog in courts with the inability to go to trial, they're just going to sit out in society for a year, year and a half, 2 years, and they're just going to keep getting picked up with more guns. They're out committing crimes, they're stealing, they're committing domestic assaults, aggravated robberies, things like that, and they're getting low bails and they're getting bailed out. So the federal government finally stepped in and said, if something's not going to happen at a state level, we can still have those state charges, but the federal government can step in with their federal gun charges and say, all right, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this, we're going to indict you federally.
Is there not a backlog then through the court systems on the federal level?
They can move a little quicker, especially since they're not going to take as many cases. So here at a local level, like our county attorney's office is going to have a much higher caseload, where the federal level, they're only going to take kind of those higher level ones. Even we have, bank robberies here in our city, and the feds will take it, they might indict someone after 11, 12 bank robberies. They'll still go after them, but really they're going after the big players. So usually they're going to go after whatever is kind of that hot button issue. Yeah. I'm trying to think of other things. Yeah.
In your estimation, is there a shortage of district court judges in Minnesota? And so is there any kind of movement to increase? So the backlogs, I hear that a lot, that case backlogs are really
Yeah, I know the court system is backed up, and mind you, I don't work for, for the courts or anything, but I know that some judges actually have come out of retirement and they've helped to hear some of these cases so that they can clear some of them up. And they're still doing some remote and some in person. So we are finally at a point where we're trying to clear up that backlog and handling more criminal cases than we normally would in the past, just to try to get back to where we should. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, 3-minute warning. See, I can just talk forever. I guess other things that we see in our community, and not to say that, we do have a very good community, and we always say that we want people to feel safe in Fridley, and people can feel safe. We see the bad things, but by and large, the people who live here and work here and even just drive through here are great people, and they mean you no harm. They're here to do good things, and those are the people that, we serve everyone, including the criminals, but really those are the people that we're out here to make feel safe, and you can feel safe living or working in Fridley and in the community around us. It's just, we're hoping that we can get after this, small percentage of people who are out there constantly victimizing people, and hopefully it turns around soon.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
What kind of activities do the local police department do that are, to be seen more in the community, and more community activities? Are there
Like community outreach type activities. Yeah, we do a lot of that, and we like to say we did it before it was popular, just because it's the right thing to do. We've done safety camp for 25, 26 years, where we bring in kids and they get to know us and our police, fire, medics, and get to know us as people, and then we show them who we really are, like at the end of it, when we put on our uniforms. But we do coats from cops, we do coffee with a cop, we have school resource officers at 3 of our schools here in the city. We have a citizen advisory group, which is made up of people from diverse backgrounds from our community, and they meet once a month with our chief, and we just talk about things going on in our community and in our society. We also, boy, there's a lot. We have a whole list of them, and that's one of the things that we have, kind of 5 pillars of our police department, 5 things that we really want to focus on, and right in the middle of it is fabric of the community. We always say we want to be a fabric of the community. People in our community who may not need our services very often, maybe once in their lifetime, we want them to know who we are, and let them know that we're here for them, and even though they might not interact with us every day, we are there for them to keep them safe, make sure they can go about their day and feel safe, and just know that we're out there for them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want this at all?
That's okay.
All right.
Can I just page forward? Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going. Okay, so, I'm gonna try and stand here. You can hear me, right? Okay. It sounds a little differently from up here. I'm Amanda. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at Alexandra House. I've been in this role for about 3 years now, and before that I did hospital advocacy, and did hotline phone calls at a sexual and domestic violence nonprofit in Chicago, which is kind of what funneled me into this work. I within my role, I do a lot with community engagement, but as well as just communications, social media, fundraising, events, and because of my prior training and direct service, I also help out at our shelter when needed, which I really enjoy because I know that I was not built for direct service full time, but I like being able to still work with people and offer my assistance whenever I can. Something I just want to say to reiterate and support about Fridley is being at all of these community engagement events, which we have a lot. I'm not always at all of them. Sometimes it's our volunteers, but any that I am at that is in Fridley, we always see Fridley PD there, which is awesome, and they're always very interactive with the community, and that's something that we really appreciate. So Alexandra House is a nonprofit we started about 45 years ago in Anoka County. Since then, we had our first women's shelter housed about 13 people. We are now at between average 35. COVID has changed that a little bit, but we have the space for 35. We started with a hotline, and then we were able to open up a shelter, and then from there we've added just programs throughout the years. So we now have what I do, community engagement, but also elder abuse services, legal advocacy, supportive housing services. We are able to provide food shelves to participants who are not in shelter, and youth services, and I know I'm missing a few, but we'll hit on them as I go through. So 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate or ex-intimate partner. So we know that this is happening, and that's why it is so critical that we have services available for those experiencing this. We also know that 1 in 4 men will also experience this. So at Alexandra House, we do serve women, men, and children. We do not house men in our shelter, but we do have a grant in partnership with a local hotel where we're able to house men there, just since we do see less men come in for services, and given the women at shelter, the women and children who oftentimes are fleeing a very traumatic experience, we don't want to re-traumatize them in any way. The need. So from 2020, we've seen an increase of 10% in calls that Anoka County has responded to that are domestic related. In 2021, there were 26 known domestic related homicides, and we're actually up to 18 now this year, the youngest of which was 14, and it was a young boy who was trying to intervene between his mother and her ex-intimate partner. So to go over some of our services, something that I missed was our hospital advocacy, our support groups, and our 24-hour helpline. Again, I will go into more of these in a second, but I will say that all of our services are free and confidential. At our emergency shelter, if our shelter is not full, we will accept people from Hennepin, Ramsey, Anoka County. Once we reach that full status, we will only accept people from Anoka County, since we know that we are the only domestic violence shelter in Anoka County, and we know that they most likely don't have any other options. So we're able to reshape some of our spaces and make it so then we can give them a safe space until we can get them established in an actual room in our shelter. So our 24-hour emergency shelter, it is in Blaine. Last year we served 514 victims and survivors and their children, which is equivalent to 7,458 nights of safety. 14 and a half is the average length of stay in shelter. Right before COVID, this was much higher. We were at about 32, and that was a huge increase that we had seen over time, especially with finding a safe space and housing being difficult. As COVID has become normalized in a sense in our community, we see how more clients are staying at our shelter longer again. So we expect that that number will rise as can be very difficult to find that affordable and safe housing and that next step. So at our shelter, we serve 3 meals a day plus snacks. We have everything that somebody could need, especially when you're fleeing from a violent situation. You're just grabbing the basics if you even have a chance to grab that. So we have the simple things like shampoo and conditioner, to clothes, to toys during Christmas and for birthdays. We also, our shelters where our 24/7 helpline is answered out of, and we have seen a pretty large increase in calls that we have received. And these could be calls from police officers as they're on the scene, and they will connect us with the victim, and we'll just go over a little bit about our services, let that person know that we are there if they would like to work with us. But then it can also be people who are looking to connect with a legal advocate, or somebody who says that, my friend or loved one disclosed that they were assaulted. How can I be supportive of that? So we're there as a resource. There's no stupid question. There's no question too small. We take all calls, and we're just there to help and support community members. So we also have one of our largest programs is our legal services, and we have seen a huge increase in assistance when victims are looking to obtain an order for protection. The legal system can be very intimidating, as many of us know, and complex and complicated, especially for someone who's fleeing a violent situation and needs safety right then and there. And with so many backlogs in the courts, it doesn't always make that very easy. So our legal advocates can help victims and survivors obtain orders for protection, as well as just be an extra point of support for them as they go to, if they have to go to court. And with COVID, a lot of things went virtual, and so that was a bit harder to people not maybe having a computer at home or not having a secure connection, and being able to just simple things like that our legal advocates are able to help them with, and just help explain the process and break it down into some more manageable pieces, because it is very intimidating and overwhelming. We also have hospital advocates. So if someone were to disclose that they were assaulted at a hospital, what happens is a sane nurse, which is sexual assault nurse examiner, would come and meet that person at the hospital and go through the evidence kit with them if they choose to. We also at that same time will send a Alexandra House hospital advocate to be there with that person and just, again, be extra support, help explain anything about the evidence kit to them, let them know their rights. And the SANE nurses are really amazing and do most of that anyways. But we know that being in that position, you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable position, especially after experiencing something so traumatic. And we also don't want someone to feel re-traumatized either. So this has gone virtual. So what we do is we now have a confidential portal, kind of like Zoom, but not Zoom because it's completely confidential. And that would connect an advocate with a patient. We were back in person for a little bit, and then COVID numbers went up again, so the hospitals asked us to go back virtually. And we're still going back and forth about that. Unfortunately, it is usually better to be in person because you establish that connection. However, with COVID, it's just something that isn't possible right now. So at our shelter, every family will have an advocate that they work with. And these advocates will help them ensure that they receive whatever they need. So they'll help them get into housing, and if they need a housing or rental subsidy, they will be able to put in the paperwork for that and help them figure that part out. Especially financial and legal expenses. We see a lot of this when people go to move. Moving into a new place. I just recently did that. It was horrible. It's much more expensive than you'd think. Everything from a pan to a spoon, it adds up very quickly. So our advocates are there to hopefully just make it a smoother transition and just as smooth as possible, getting that person into a safe environment, having them reestablish their lives, especially for their families and their children who are going to school every day. We don't want to interrupt that for them. Another thing we have is our food shelf. So if someone may not be staying in shelter, but they are working with a legal advocate or our youth services advocates, they go into the high schools and they hold support groups as well as one-on-one work. And so they might be working with somebody who shares that it's been a very tough month and they just do not have the extra money or resources to get food for that month. So we're able to provide them with a food basket or food shelf, we call it, and it's canned goods, cookies, whatever we have at our shelter that was recently donated and that we're able to provide. And then we also have clothing there, especially in the winter. Winter jackets are something very big that's needed. And then we have everything to our holiday shop, which is something we do in December, and we have new toys and pajamas, slippers, all of the works donated, and we're able to put those together and gift them to families. As we all know, the holidays can be a very large financial burden, and definitely not something that somebody who is establishing this new life, this new home, is always able to do. So we're able to provide that as well. So in total, In 2021, we provided 1,770 people with services. So that's everything from legal, youth services, elder abuse services, any kind of direct service. Overall, we served 12,500, and that's including community engagement and all of our classroom engagement presentations that our youth services holds. These are just some quotes from our participants. I won't read every single one aloud, but I'll read a few and I'll let you take a second to read them too. Alexandra House helped me feel safe and ensured I had a safety plan when I left. That quote really stands out to me just because I know that when people come to shelter, oftentimes, they may go back to an abuser. And being able to have a safety plan when they leave will at least give them something to go off of if they leave again. It on average takes about 7 times for a person to leave their abuser until they leave for good. So every single time when somebody leaves shelter and we know that there's that possibility that they're going to return to their abuser, we make sure that we establish a safety plan for them. And it's everything to just making sure you have a go kit in your bag or in your car or somewhere in the house, to thinking about your kids if you would have to pick them up from school, if there's somebody that can babysit. Just having all those bases covered. So October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We have a few initiatives. I know we're coming to an end of the month, but this is something that can be done every single day, which is just spreading and promoting awareness of domestic violence. It's definitely an issue that when we're silent about it, it doesn't make it go away. It's still happening. So the more that we can talk about it and teach one another the best ways to promote healthy relationships and what that looks like is going to be the best way to prevent it. Any questions? I think I probably used up all my time. Oh, okay, good.
Where do you get your revenues from?
So I would say majority of it comes from the state and different grants. A small amount comes from individuals, but we do have somebody who works specifically in grant work. And so she's able to, whenever we see a new grant open up that it's something a domestic violence shelter is appropriate for, she's able to do the research and write pieces for that. So majority of it is grant work, is from grants or government. Yeah.
You have said pets.
What was that?
You have said pets.
So
Forgot about the big.
we do not. Okay, so this is a good question. We do not take pets right now at our shelter, but we work with, we have a few people who are just volunteers or have worked with Alexandra House for a while, and they will foster the pets while the person is in shelter. And there's also an organization in the Twin Cities who will also take in pets. So we make sure that that isn't an obstacle, because it is something to consider, and abusers will threaten to harm pets because they know that's a way to control that victim or survivor. So if somebody were to come forward and say, I would like to stay here, I need a safe space, but I don't know what to do with my dog, we'll make sure that we set something up so they don't have to worry about that, and that doesn't stop them from finding a safe space. Yeah.
How many staff do you have and how many volunteers do you use?
So staff, we're at about 45 to 50. Half of it, I would say, is full-time. The other half is part-time. So because we're a 24/7 shelter, we have people at our shelter 24/7. So we have overnight staff, and a lot of our part-time staff members will do the overnight shifts. Volunteers, I would say it can range. We have about, I would say, around 50 consistent volunteers. So those are people who have gone through our volunteer training, so they have earned their certificate to provide advocacy at shelter, or if it's they go to the hospital. And we have about 50 of those, so they'll come in once a week or whatever works with their schedule. And then close to 200 to 250 kind of one-time volunteers throughout the year. So it could be people holding a food drive, or what we do a lot is small groups can come in and serve a meal at our shelter. So they'll come in and grill and put together a few games for the kids. And so we have a lot of volunteer groups help out in that way. Anything else? All right, well, thank you so much.
Okay, I will also try to stay tied to the podium. So I'm just gonna skip over that one because I'll talk about myself again. But I'm Katie Metcalf. I am the Director of Community-Based Programming at Lee Carlson Center. We are a nonprofit that serves both Anoka County and Hennepin County, as well as some surrounding areas. We'll get referrals from Ramsey. We've had a couple from Scott, just kind of surrounding areas. A couple of things that I'm going to go over. So first is kind of an introduction about Lee Carlson Center, myself, our mission. We'll talk about what our program consists of, how we follow state statutes and types of services. We are a therapeutic organization, and so we have very specific goals involved in our services that we provide to clients. So we'll talk about what those things are. We'll talk about a couple of numbers, and then a really powerful client experience that I would love to share with you all. So, like I said, Lee Carlson Center is a nonprofit. We were founded in 1979. At that time, we were known as the Central Center for Family Resources, but our mission is to provide community and school-based mental health services. Right now, we currently have an office right down the road, as well as our severe and persistent mental illness drop-in center. It's called Bridgeview. Fridley police actually serve lunch there once a month. And it's where members who have been diagnosed with a severe and persistent mental illness, so something like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, something that has a great impact on their ability to engage in the community. They can come in. We have therapeutic services, peer support services. They get free lunch every day. And so that's right down the road, right next to our Fridley clinic, where we provide therapeutic services. We have a clinic in Brooklyn Center, a clinic in Coon Rapids, and our newest clinic in St. Louis Park, which is where I'm housed out of. Our mission is to provide exceptional, affordable, person-centered, and creative services, strategies, and solutions to family, children, youth, and adults in our community. So we do that with a variety of different services. I'll be talking about the domestic abuse program because that's kind of where my heart and soul lives. But we also do have clinical services for adults and children. We have school-linked mental health services where providers are actually embedded in the schools, so families don't have to worry about getting them to our clinics or from our clinics. They just get pulled right from class, and they can participate in that. We have an intensive therapeutic foster care program for children and families who are involved in the foster care or pre-adoptive system. We have in-home services for child therapeutic services that may not be involved in the foster care or adoptive system. And then, like I said, we have our SBMI drop-in center, as well as we do adult rehabilitative mental health services, ARM services, and supportive housing services. I am in charge of our domestic abuse program and our ARMS and supportive housing services. And I am a licensed professional clinical counselor. So I have my master's in community mental health from MSU. And I'm also a board-approved supervisor. So what that means is I can do supervision for people that are working towards their licensure. I'll just back up for 1 second. A little bit more about me. Before I took this job, I worked for Lee Carlson Center for about 3 years in December. I worked with people who were court-ordered for therapeutic services as a DOC-approved sex offender treatment therapist. So I worked with people who had committed sexual offenses who lived in the community, who were either on probation or parole. I did that for my internship in graduate school, and then I did it for about 3 years after that. But as you can imagine, it's a very difficult job. And so I found Lee Carlson Center, and I've been here ever since. I helped work in incorporating our current domestic abuse program that's more trauma-focused and evidence-based. So that program is, it follows the state statute. So like Ryan was talking about, the state has lots of rules and statutes about things, and one of them is a domestic abuse program for people who are identified as offenders. We provide services for people who are also identified as victims or survivors, but what I'm going to be covering most today is those who are identified as aggressors that live in the community. So there are several types of services that we provide to people identified as aggressors. The first is our intake and diagnostic assessment. So if anybody in here has done any therapy in the past, or their kids have done any therapy, you might be familiar with it. It's basically where you go in and somebody asks you a bunch of boring background information questions. We talk about why you're there, what kind of services you need. And the state statute asks that we identify other areas where we may need to refer out. So chemical dependency is one of the biggest ones that we need to assess. From that assessment, we make the recommendation what kind of programming they would benefit the most from. So most people end up in our group therapy program. State statute says that they need 36 hours of programming or 24 sessions. So what we do in our groups is we do 20 weeks of 2-hour sessions. That gives them 40 hours. And these services are provided or divided between men and women's services. So just like Amanda was talking about, there's the added piece of re-traumatizing. If somebody of the same gender that offended against you is in a group, because most of our people that we see in our group services have also been victims or survivors of some sort of abuse. If they're not appropriate for group services, we have them participate in one-on-one individual sessions. Those are 24 one-hour sessions to abide by state statute. And usually people are recommended for those services if they have any kind of language barrier that would make it difficult for them to participate in group. So we provide them with translation services so that they can still get the help that they are court ordered to have or that they really do need. We also provide individual therapy services for people who might have a cognitive deficit that might make it difficult for them to participate in group, as well as any severe and persistent mental illness symptoms. So we'll see clients who come in with a schizophrenia diagnosis or with a significant personality disorder diagnosis, and that makes interacting in group really, really challenging. So we can provide them with individual therapy services, same quality of care, but just on a one-on-one basis so that they get the services that they need. So there's lots and lots of state statute requirements, and I didn't want to bore you all with all of the super fun legal definitions of things, but here's some of the things that our clients are required to consent to and our clinicians are required to consent to in being involved in services. So the first is that they must sign a release of information for the agency that refers them. We get a lot of people that are referred by probation or parole, first and foremost. We also have clients who are referred by CPS, and we also have clients that are often referred preemptively by lawyers, attorneys, that kind of thing, so that they can go to court and show like, hey, I'm participating in this thing that you're gonna ask me to participate in. And so they have to have a release of information signed so that we can coordinate with those referral parties. Because one of the things that we are responsible for reporting is if clients come to group and they, or individual, and they identify that they violated a domestic abuse no contact order, or DANCO, we are required to report that immediately to their probation or parole. We also are required to report if they report to us that they're continuing to engage in any abusive or aggressive behavior, or if they report that if they engage in abusive or aggressive behavior towards any of our staff, which has happened. It doesn't happen very often, but it definitely does. They also sign a participation agreement indicating that they will not be charged with any same or similar crimes. So another domestic assault, an assault, disorderly conduct, a DANCO violation, any of those things could result in termination from the program because they're not working on the things that they need to be working on. One of the really important things in the state statute is that the person that's identified as the victim has the right to know that the person identified as the offender is involved in services. So we have them sign a release of information to that person, and that person is notified by myself in usually a letter form that just indicates, per state statute, we need to inform you that they're enrolled in programming. This is when they started. We also need to provide them with referral services for if they would like any additional care as people identified as victims. So that's also in the letter. And then it also states in there, if you don't want this information or want no further contact, you are not required to receive any additional information. So they, most of the time, just don't respond. But it's good to get additional resources out to them. And for those identified as victims to know the person that was abusive or aggressive towards me is involved in some sort of services. We are not allowed to provide any couples therapy services to clients who are actively involved in our domestic abuse program because they have other things that they need to work on before they can be involved in couples therapy. So when they've successfully completed the program, we certainly can provide them those services, but until that point, we are not able to, and that's from the state statute. We do have quite a few people who opt to also participate in individual therapy services outside of our domestic abuse program because, like I said, most of them are victims in some way. And so they often have some of their own stuff that they need to work on individually. And we are happy to provide that. Part of our programming is that they sign an attendance agreement. So because it is court ordered, we have some more kind of strict guidelines about that. And then they are required to complete 5 assignments that are part of the program. And I'll talk about kind of what that covers in a minute. So the goals, these are the things that we work on with people who are identified as aggressors. So they will work on identifying and using coping skills for regulating emotions, practicing emotional identification, and demonstrating insight into their triggers. And that's accomplished through a couple of assignments. So we have a self-control plan assignment that helps walk them through what are my triggers? How do I feel those things in my body? What kind of thoughts am I having about them? Additional feelings that I might be experiencing, so that clients are able to identify, rather than getting to the point where Ryan was talking about of kind of like, oh, I'm immediately up here. There's lots of steps that lead to that place. And so helping them identify, okay, I'm at this step instead of just jumping all the way. It's been really, really helpful. And our midterm and maintenance plan assignments are kind of assessing where they feel like they're at kind of midway through the program in using some of these. And then maintenance is kind of a safety plan. So like Amanda was talking about, when you leave our services, how can you continue to take care of yourself? And so they'll put the information they gleaned from their self-control plan into that maintenance plan. The second really important goal is identifying unhealthy and abusive behaviors, understanding the cycle of abuse, power, and control in relationships, and demonstrating empathy for their abusive behaviors. So this is a really, really important piece. Just like the self-control plan and being able to identify triggers, they need to be able to identify what is healthy and unhealthy in relationships. How am I using, we mostly see male clients, how am I using my power and control within this relationship? Or how are other people using that? And then the empathy and accountability is what's one of the most important things for me. Coming from the sex offender treatment world, that I've seen the impact that kind of training and assessing for empathy and accountability has made on clients. And so it was really important that we included that in our domestic abuse program. So clients walk through what's called the most violent or abusive behavior. It doesn't have to be what they're court ordered for programming for, but they have to identify within the context of an intimate relationship. So somebody that they live with, roommate, family, children, partner, somebody that they have like a significant relationship with. When was I most violent and abusive? What did that look like? What was I feeling at the time? What was I thinking? And then, which is usually the hardest part, what was the other person feeling? What were they thinking? What might be the impact on that person now? And that is one of the most powerful things that they can identify, because usually there's a lot of blame, there's a lot of deflection as a form of protection for themselves. So having another group of people that they can talk through those things with has been really effective. And then at the end of the program, we have them do an amends letter where they write, it's not an apology letter, but it's an amends letter where they write to the person they identified in the most violent behavior assignment from their perspective, and then from that person's perspective. So they have to write 2 different letters. And that is where you can really see the changes in their understanding of empathy, triggers, their own experiences with trauma. All of that kind of stuff really comes through when we're talking about that assignment. Some information about the clients that we've served at Lee Carlson Center. So you can see from 2019 to currently 2022, how many clients we have served. And then the darker blue line is the percentage of clients who have successfully completed the program. I would say most of the time people are terminated from the program for attendance. We try our very best to give them a lot of chances. If they're meeting with their probation officer, or if they, their kiddo has to go to urgent care, something like that, we're happy to excuse those absences. People who just don't want to come, those are unexcused, and they will typically end up coming back. But the percentage that you see here is those clients who have successfully completed the program. We were doing virtual groups all throughout 2020 and halfway through 2021. We came back to in-person July of 2021. the virtual groups were helpful in the pandemic, but not necessarily super helpful in general. Just like any of us have been in groups or meetings online, people can be doing all sorts of things. We had lots of sleeping. And so being back in person is much better. Our groups are typically, I would say, 12 and under number of participants, and 2 facilitators. We have 1 male facilitator right now, and the rest of our facilitators are women. And so it's a nice dynamic for usually the men that are our clients to be learning about this stuff from a woman. And then I've also seen the benefit of having another man in the room kind of check them on, this is your perception? Well, I'm not really sure if I agree with that. And that's been really exceedingly helpful. I wanted to close off. So this is actually a very shortened version of this client's email. But we had received a really wonderful email from a client that I had worked with in the past as one of his facilitators. But after I moved into more director roles, he is taken over by a couple of other really excellent facilitators. But he is court ordered. So I'll just read a bit of it to you. So he said, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hesitant, nervous, and scared at the thought of being in a place where I needed to be honest with myself, hold myself accountable, and be vulnerable to my feelings, all in a room full of strangers. The first session was a huge relief, as I felt super comfortable and amazed that there were others that shared my thoughts and feelings on certain topics. I felt heard, and the input was just what I needed to hear. It was nice to share how I thought and felt in a safe setting, and the discussions we had were taken to heart and very useful. Again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of what has significantly changed my way of thinking, how I go about handling stressful situations, and realizing that I am not a bad person, just a person who made a bad choice. You never judged, thought poorly of, or discredited my thoughts. You always listened and took into consideration why or how I thought what I did. I would highly suggest this program not just to someone who is court-ordered, but to anyone wanting to find their true them. Thank you for leading and being part of my journey to self-discovery and not losing faith in me or the others, regardless if some were just there to check a box. I have gained so much knowledge and self-awareness in the past 20 sessions that I never thought was possible. Any questions? Yes. We do not. We currently do not have a wait list in any of our programs. We just started another women's aggressors group that meets in St. Louis Park from 5 to, or sorry, not St. Louis Park, Brooklyn Center, from 5 to 7. Otherwise, our groups are very open. Thank you.
Oh, hi there. I'm going to try and use the handheld, so I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Amanda's going to help me out here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about empowerment as a bystander. And I think that we all sometimes, hear situations on TV or we see things and maybe we walked away from, and afterwards we think about, like, what could I have done? Or if I could do it over, right? Or we wonder, as we're seeing things on TV, why didn't somebody do something? And you start to feel a little helpless. You start to feel like, there's got to be something I can do to help some of the violence and the situations that are going on. This is not a be-all or end-all conversation. It's not going to give you the perfect thing to do, but I hope that it expands your options as you are thinking about things that are going on. My name is Dawn Rudd, and I'm the Elder Abuse Services Coordinator for Alexandra House. I've been there for 17 years. part of my work was in the high schools for many years as well, working with teens. And so this is kind of an activity I've done with adults and with teens, kind of trying to figure out, what can I do if I see a certain situation? And one of the biggest pieces is I need to be safe, right? So if I see something going on, part of it is how is this affecting me? Do I need to get out of here? What's happening in the area around me? Are there others I can get involved? And so in any situation, I would say first kind of figure out your surrounding and what is the safest for you. I'm going to read a scenario, and I'm going to have you just sit for a minute and think, like, what's your first gut reaction? And then what could I do? Or maybe what could someone else do? Even if I don't feel like I could do something, what could someone else do? And I'm asking more for it to come from a positive place rather than a negative place. So what could I positively do in this situation to potentially de-escalate or change what's going on? First scenario, think of the favorite grocery store that you go to, right? You're rolling your groceries out of the cart into the parking lot, and as you get to your car, you're hearing loud voices. You're hearing, yelling and screaming, and you see it's coming from the car next to you. You open up the trunk of your car, you're putting your groceries away. It's getting more and more intense. You can look in the window, you see one person kind of backed away, the other person's kind of like, got their hands going right, and you're thinking, what can I do? What's going on? The person is looking kind of panicked. That seems to be the victim here. What's your first gut reaction? What's the first thing that you could do?
Knock on the window.
You want to write these down? Knock on the window. Is everything okay? Okay. Knock on the window, is everything okay? What else could someone do? Doesn't have to be something you might do, but what do you think other people might do?
Could let store employees know something may need attention in the parking lot?
Yeah, go back into the store. There's something going out in the parking lot. Can, let a store employee know, the store manager, the person at the checkout counter. Yep, so you're going to go back into the store. Call 911. I'm at the Cub Foods parking lot in Fridley. There's something going on.
Write down the license plate number.
I've got a license plate number. It's a blue car in the 4th row next to the cart intake, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts? Anybody think someone might just get in their car and drive away? I don't want to get involved. It's not my business, right? So one option might be just drive away. I'm not going to think about it. Not my deal. Yeah. Would it change if you were with someone? If you and your partner were grocery shopping together, would you make a different decision? What might you do if there's 2 of you?
You might feel safer doing something because I think, people are shooting each other over stupid things. You don't know if they have a gun there or not, and they would just, it's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I would feel safer if there was somebody else with me. Now, maybe they shoot both of us, but at least they may not.
Yeah. So now I've got 2 people, right? So maybe knocking on the window makes me feel a little more secure because I've got someone with me. Maybe I stay by the car and my partner goes in and tells the person at the store, right? So that second person, what's really interesting is statistics show if you are by yourself, you're more likely to do something than if you're with another person or a group. Because if my friends are ignoring it, I'm going to ignore it too. Oh, it must not be as big a deal as I think. So it's interesting that individuals are more likely to interact and do something than a group. So let's look at what you guys put down here.
I was say something that might endanger them than I would have been myself, especially people running around with extended magazines and shooting for no reason. On the flip side, I always try to teach my kids to do the right thing, so it's kind of a tough scenario.
So I'm repeating just for the microphone's sake. So you're saying oftentimes with my family, so my wife or my kids are with me, so I'm going to be worried about their safety in my interaction, but then I'm also trying to teach my children to do the right thing. So there's kind of a mix, like, where do I go with this? Absolutely, and that comes to that, first checking out my safety and what do I feel okay with doing. So there's a thing called direct, distract, and delegate. And direct is knocking on the window. So this person is absolutely doing the direct thing. Telling the store employees, like you guys, maybe I put plants in the audience, I don't know. Telling the store employees is a delegate. You are going and delegating it to someone else, right? I don't want to deal with this, but I want somebody at the store to know there's something going on. Calling 911, getting the license plate is another delegate. The drive away is really something that I know that we'll do, but I hope that you would drive away and take some action. Call 911 and you drove away. Can anybody think of a distraction? Because I don't think that people often think about this.
Honk your horn.
Yeah, honk your horn. The people in the car might get startled, right?
Or just walk in front and just look at them. And maybe don't do anything, but just so they see that this is what they see.
Yeah, I'm acknowledging that there's something going on here. There's people seeing, there's people watching. Distractions can also be less like I'm seeing you, right? It could be knocking on the window, holding your cell phone and saying, can you help me? Like can I use your phone? My phone broke in my car's dead, right? What that does is it momentarily stops the interaction of the two people in the car. And it's not in a threatening manner, right? Help, my phone died. Maybe you, as you're putting your groceries away, you bump the side of the car with your body, and then they look at, oh, sorry, do you want to come out and look? My cart hit your car. Do you want to make sure there's no damages? I don't think I see anything, right? That gives opportunity for people in the car to step out if they need to. It changes, like, oh, you hit my car, right? That can change the whole dynamic and focus of people inside the car, right? I'm not saying that you intentionally damage their car, but if you bump it with your body rather than your cart, right? It might be a momentary distraction. Maybe you drop your bag of groceries, or you drop a few groceries and my groceries rolled under your car, right? Can you help me get my groceries? And you show them like the torn bag. It's non-threatening. It's a very non-threatening way to make a distraction. You're not solving the problem between those two people, but you are momentarily giving that person who is a potential victim a moment to get out of a car, to ask for help, right? In a non-threatening way. Now again, people are gonna say there could be a gun, there could be those things, right? So you have to decide if you feel safe doing that, if that's an okay thing for you. It might be that you get in the car and you drive to the back of the parking lot and you call the police. And that's okay too. You get to decide what feels okay for you to do in the situation that you're in. The tough part is that we see a lot of people just, not my business, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to call on my neighbors who are fighting even though I'm hearing stuff crashing against the walls and I'm hearing screaming because, last time somebody did that, they got targeted, right? You can call the police anonymously, right? But the doing nothing can actually get more people hurt. And that's not your responsibility. But if we do want to change things in our community, if we do want to make an impact, how can we as ordinary citizens do something? Actually, Deputy Director George, shared something that happened recently, if he wants to share that. If you want to talk to that one.
Talking about the one just the other day.
Yeah.
So I kind of talked about it a little bit before, but we had somebody step up and he heard something going on in the apartment next to him and did the right thing. He went and confronted these people that were.
Oh, actually, I think it was the other one where
all
someone
right.
got hurt more after.
Well, so this was actually a few years ago when I was a patrol sergeant. I responded to a call, and it was a lady who was a personal care attendant at an apartment building in our city. And she hadn't returned home from work, and her family was really worried about her just because she didn't call, she never showed up. And so they went to this apartment where she was supposed to be providing care for someone. Her car was still out front. And they look all over for her, they can't find her. Her car's there, it's locked. There's no sign of anything going on in her car. But they call and they say, she's missing, we don't know where she is, this is really weird, she's not around here. So we start kind of canvassing the area, and it just, things weren't adding up. It seemed really out of character for her to be missing. So we luckily chased down every avenue, and we started getting more people involved, and we started pinging her cell phone and doing whatever we could to find out where she was. And this was probably a couple hours after we had been on scene, and a guy came home to one of the neighboring apartment units, and he said, "Oh, are you here for the lady whose car is sitting there?" We said, "Yeah, do you know anything about this?" He said, "Yeah, she was walking out to her car, and some guy came, and he looked like he had something in his hand." He said, "I don't know if it was a gun or a knife or a screwdriver or something, but he kind of like pushed her into his car and then drove away." And I said, "When did this occur?" And he said, "Oh, it had to be like 3-4 hours ago." And I said, "Did you tell anyone? Did you think of calling 911? He said, "Well, I figured if I got home right now," because he had gone out to play pool or something. He said, "I figured if I got home and her car was still here, then I would call 911. And I said, "Well, we're here, so what did the guy look like? What kind of car did he have?" So then we realized like this lady was legitimately kidnapped at gunpoint or knife point. And while we're on scene and we're trying to figure out where she is, she was luckily let go by her assailant over in Brooklyn Center. He had raped her repeatedly and poured bleach all over her and poured bleach everywhere he could to try to get rid of any DNA. And she was able to flag down somebody who called 911. So we found out, okay, she's now been recovered. But this poor lady, someone witnessed her being kidnapped at gunpoint, led into another car, and then she's raped, and this scars her for the rest of her life. Terrible situation for her, and this witness didn't do anything about it. He could have called, he could have done something. Even if he didn't want to get involved, he could have called 911 and said, "This guy just left in this car, and we're on him right away," before she's traumatized further. So luckily we did find out who he was. He was a sex offender from Chicago, and he's doing 28 years in prison, which is nice. But terrible for the victim. She's got to live with that the rest of her life. So that's just a local story that somebody could have done something and they didn't. And it's heartbreaking that it happened.
Yeah. And, and thank God it turned out that they did find her and she is alive. But that whole piece of the moment that bystander saw that, he had options, right? And sometimes we think our only option is to drive away and not do anything. And so my hope is that we can open up our options. And I think sometimes I think a lot about bystander is in our own family. Your family's at a local park having a picnic. You've got a couple of picnic tables. You see one adult family member slap another adult family member. What do? You've got your family, you've got your kids, you're in a public place. Anybody have thoughts about what you would do when it's your own family?
Be a lot more aggressive than if it was a stranger.
So you might be much more direct. feel like you have a little bit more empowerment to address your family? Or is it, oh, they always fight?
Distract, I mean, try to get another topic going or get one of them aside, try to, in a sense, separate them without getting involved in what the discussion was. It's like this going up and saying, oh, I need so-and-so to help me or do something. I mean, that would be one way of, de-escalating the situation, hopefully.
Right.
Get them separated.
And you bring up a good point. Our hope is to de-escalate, not escalate. So however we choose to confront or address or distracting isn't making anyone feel bad or good, right? We're just changing the situation. And then it might be that you have the ability later as a family member to go talk to that abuser or talk to that victim and support them and let them know, like, that wasn't okay for him or her to do that to you. Are you okay? Can I help? Right? Or somebody confronting the abuser, which often we don't do to our own families, right? It's not okay for you to treat, him or her like that. And then you've got children around. One of you mentioned my kids are there. How do I talk to my kids about the fact that one family member just hit another family member and now we're pretending it didn't happen? This is near and dear to my heart because of situations that I saw as a kid, and family just kind of like downplaying it and saying it didn't really matter. Let's not disrupt the family holiday, right? And so being really careful about, making sure that we're not ignoring what we see, because then that gives the person permission. No one stopped me from doing it, so I can continue. Kids seeing that that's an okay behavior, letting that abuser think that his or her behavior is okay because no one in the family said anything to me. And then the biggest thing is that victim thinks it's okay to be treated that way because no one stepped in to help, no one came and asked her if she was okay afterwards. So that victim feels like it's okay for him or her, it's okay for someone to treat me that way. I deserved that. So be really careful when you're silent, because silence can often be an agreement. I hope that you think about direct, distract, and delegate, and again, your safety is the main priority. We don't want anybody getting hurt, but know that you have options as a community member to step in and help keep your community safe. Anybody have questions around these very simple direct, distract, or delegate thoughts?
Are you seeing more people videotape? I mean, I see it on the news, right? You see the videos all the time, rather than stepping in.
Yep. I would say I wish people would, if you're going to pull out your phone, please call 911 first before you start. You had mentioned something earlier about it would be nice if people who took those videotapes stayed around rather than just like post them. Like, can you help the police department out, right? And show us what you taped and be a witness rather than just take a videotape. But I will say sometimes pulling out your cell phone can make someone be like, oh, this is on camera. And sometimes that will stop. But that, again, could potentially be an escalation. So again, you need to feel safe about your choices that you're making.
One of the things about delegating is we get so many calls sometimes of, someone was breaking into cars all night in one neighborhood, and we'll go there the next day and we're taking, 10 theft from vehicle reports, and we'll talk to someone. They'll say, you know what? I saw a guy walking down the street and he looked really suspicious, and I heard the glass shatter on a car, and there's dogs barking, and he's going up into people's backyards and stuff, and we'll say, well, why didn't you call? Well, we didn't want to bother you. It's like, no, that's our job. You're not bothering us. We'd much rather go get that person who is out victimizing people. They're stealing laptops out of cars. They're stealing guns out of cars. I don't know why people leave their guns in their cars, but they're victimizing people. And now it's more work for us on the back end. If you're worried about bothering us? No, bother us when it's happening, because we'll go get this person who probably already has a whole bunch of warrants, they got a bunch of other stolen property with them, and it's gonna, it will prevent those thefts from happening. So it's just all the time, well, we didn't wanna bother you, we didn't wanna bother you. No, you're not bothering us. We'd rather get there and confirm that nothing's going on, or, you know, even the call of the people arguing in the Cub Foods parking lot. If we go there and, yeah, there's no assault that has occurred, you know, we're gonna try to separate those people and say, hey, do you have a place to go cool off, you know? That assault didn't happen, so we're not investigating a crime, but we just prevented something from happening. You know, that squad car rolling up behind that person is gonna change their tune pretty quick. And if they wanna yell and get angry, you know, better with us than with somebody else, because we're equipped to deal with it.
Any questions for any of the speakers today? Amanda or Katie, do you wanna? Okay. Well, we thank you all for coming. Compassion Action Network tries to put on different community events like this. We do it every few months, and so if you're interested, make sure that you add your email address or follow us on, I believe we're on Facebook, and our events are promoted there as well. I'm sure the speakers who presented today will be around for a few minutes if you have any other questions or want to talk privately. Thank you for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, and please fill out the evaluation form.